Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 9th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to.
Moshe, I learned a new word on Monday. Scoregami, meaning a football score that has never been seen before in the 106-year history of the NFL.
Yeah, who knew this? The Ravens-Bills game, which, by the way, was an unbelievable game with a big Bills comeback, ended 41-40. Apparently, there's never been an NFL game that ended 41-40 before. So it officially marks here the 1,000th 92nd unique final score in NFL history. So, there's common ones like 14-7 or 14-3, 21-3, etc. 41-40 for the first time. And Jill, apparently there's more than 1,000 scores that have not been achieved. But in particular, as a lot of the games in the last couple of years have become much more high scoring, we're seeing more of these so-called scoregamis. So, fun fact for you to impress the people around you. Sunday night, Bills-Ravens was a scoregami. Unique score, 41-40. We're really stretching here for interesting factoids. But nonetheless, who knew? And Jill, before we get to the headlines here, just a reminder, we have officially launched the Mo News direct feed. It is your 24/7 news feed from Instagram, but off of Instagram. So many of you have said, I'm not on Instagram, or I'm doing a digital detox, or I have friends and family who aren't on the platform. And I'm looking for all your coverage, though, off of it. And so we have granted your wish. The Mo News direct feed is effectively a web app with one button. You can put it on your home screen of your phone and get access to our real-time stories feed, our real-time reels. It's all searchable too. It's all archived as well. So it has some added features you don't see on Instagram. And so you can check that all out only if you're a Mo News Premium subscriber. And we've extended now the free trial to a 1-month free trial for Mo News Premium subscribers. So if you check it out over at mo.news/premium, you get a 1-month free trial to check out all the premium features, the weekend Instagram feed, the workshops, the premium podcast, the Ask Moshe Anything podcast, and now the direct feed, the web app we have launched. Again, mo.news/premium. What are you waiting for, folks?
Okay, now to the headlines. The Trump administration launches a new operation in Chicago. What we know about it, and it comes as the Supreme Court clears the way for an immigration crackdown.
Yeah, we'll tell you about this order that was filed on Monday that is leading to a lot of debate.
Sticking with crime, a stabbing in Charlotte, North Carolina, getting a ton of national attention, also fueling MAGA's crime message.
Yeah, that they believe Democrats are weak on crime, especially in these big cities, and it comes as there's been this big push in a number of major cities to crack down on crime.
The trial now underway for the man who allegedly tried to assassinate President Trump on his golf course in Florida. Most just 24 hours in, and it's already bizarre.
They usually are, Jill, when the defendant is defending themselves with no attorney, which happens to be the case here. He is not a lawyer. He's an attempted assassin, alleged attempted assassin, but there was a lot of evidence that was picked up with him. And he's had some bizarre requests of the judge.
Staying in Florida, the state surgeon general defending his decision to move to roll back vaccine mandates in the state, saying they didn't need to do any analysis on what it could mean for the spread of diseases. Longtime New York Congressman Jerry Nadler says he is not running for re-election. Some of the big names who could potentially be vying for his seat.
Yeah, this is a very high-profile congressional seat that represents most of Manhattan, Upper West Side, Upper East Side, Midtown, Central Park. And there's some famous names that have been circulating around who could replace him, a Clinton and a Kennedy.
A prank from shock jock Howard Stern, who had Andy Cohen replace him for a little bit of his show on Monday, what that was all about.
Yeah, Andy told us that Howard was gone until he wasn't, and actually faked out some pretty major news outlets.
And Moshe's on this day in history.
The hip-shaking performance on national television that had parents freaking out on this day in history.
All right, the Department of Homeland Security launched what it is calling Operation Midway Blitz on Monday. It is an ICE operation focused on apprehending repeat offender illegal immigrants in Chicago and across Illinois. areas that the Department of Homeland Security says have become havens due to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's sanctuary policies. The department says the operation is in honor of Katie Abraham. She is a 20-year-old Illinois college student. She was killed in a drunk driving hit and run earlier this year, allegedly caused by a Guatemalan national who was later found in Texas and charged with possessing a false permanent resident card, a false social security card, the false use of a passport, and making a false statement on a bank application. DHS also taking the unusual step of identifying 11 migrants believed to be at large in Chicago, actually tweeting out their photos, their names, and their rap sheets, trying to frame the coverage of this mission. That list includes 34-year-old Pedro Gonzalez of Venezuela. He's described as a Tren de Aragua gang member with a past criminal history of aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, sexual assault, and other crimes.
Yeah, we've been telling you for a couple of weeks now about President Trump's plan to send more immigration-related law enforcement into Chicago because Illinois and Chicago in particular have those sanctuary city policies. They don't cooperate with federal law enforcement, so they've been looking to surge forces into the city. This is similar to what we've seen in places like D.C. and L.A. in recent months. Those surges, especially in LA, saw those massive protests at times that got violent and then led to National Guard troops being sent to Southern California. The question is, how will things go here in Chicago? Will the protests potentially get violent? Will the president make good on his threats to then send National Guard overriding the governor into Chicago? It's really something we're going to be watching here in the coming days. Now, state and local officials in Illinois and Chicago say they've got no heads up here, no coordination from the feds. The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, says no official notice. They don't know what's going on here, and they're looking for more information from the federal government. Now, that's not altogether surprising because the federal government does not trust Illinois officials or Chicago officials. They believe that they'll give a heads up to migrants, that they'll give a heads up to certain neighborhoods if they become aware of where raids are set to happen. So effectively, the feds here viewing Chicago authorities and Illinois authorities as enemies and doing this solo, it appears, for now. Senator from Illinois, Dick Durbin, longtime senator, he's a top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He accused the Trump administration of ramping up its campaign to, quote, arrest hardworking immigrants with no criminal convictions. These actions don't make us safer, Durbin said. They are a waste of money, they stoke fear, and represent another failed attempt at a distraction. Jill, you talked about the framing of this mission, right? That it's all about criminal migrants. And for the most part, in the beginning few weeks, months of the year, that was the focus of a lot of these raids and arrests. But with calls from the White House, some of the hardliners there have been pushing for more arrests over time. We have seen basically the lines cross in recent weeks of the number of migrants who have no criminal background now surpassing the number of migrants with a criminal background being taken in. So they're bringing in folks who both have a criminal background and non-criminal background, but more and more they're finding people or picking up people who have no criminal record in the U.S. besides committing the civil violation of being in the country illegally. All of this back and forth here, this fighting, particularly between the blue states and blue cities and the federal government, have led to a number of legal cases we've been watching, Jill, including the results of one we got yesterday.
Right. To that end, the Supreme Court on Monday cleared the way for the Trump administration to further crack down on immigration. Yesterday, the court backed Trump's push to allow immigration enforcement officials to continue what critics have described as roving patrols using racial profiling across Southern California. So the lower courts had said that this likely violated the Fourth Amendment. At issue were a series of incidents in which masked and heavily armed ICE agents pulled people over in LA who identify as Latino, including some U.S. citizens, and then interrogated them about their immigration status. So the lower courts ruled that ICE likely had not established the, quote, reasonable suspicion which would be required in order to justify those stops. The Supreme Court had issued an order to pause that ruling. This deals with 7 counties in Southern California, but it comes during a more widespread crackdown on immigration by the Trump administration, which is likely to view this Supreme Court ruling as approval of similar practices elsewhere. So again, a U.S. District Court in July ordered that the Department of Homeland Security discontinue the practice if the stops were based largely on a person's apparent ethnicity, language, or their presence at a particular location, like a farm or a bus stop. But the case eventually made its way to the Supreme Court.
So we should note here, this is not a final decision. This is just an emergency order related to DHS being banned from being able to use race, ethnicity, and other factors as part of a search, as part of detaining folks. They are now allowed to do that again as this case proceeds. So this case overall is proceeding, but there was this emergency case filed by the Trump administration saying, hey, we're blocked from doing this. We need this immediately. We need this ability. And that's effectively what you saw by a 6-3 majority, the conservative to liberal majority on the court, granted the Trump administration yesterday. Now, we got no official explanation from the majority, but Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who's a conservative, did file a concurring explanation as to what's going on. And this does give us some insight, Jill, at a time where there's a number of these emergency orders happening related to all the various executive orders, and the lower courts trying to stop Trump. Some of them are then going back to the Supreme Court. And so we're seeing cases here on what's called the emergency docket. So these are not the official decisions. These are requests by the Trump administration or by the other side for the Supreme Court to basically rule on something individually as part of a larger case that's going through the system. So we don't normally get a decision. Sometimes we get no explanation. But yesterday, Kavanaugh did give us an explanation as to why the majority ruled the way that they did. And so part of what Kavanaugh did yesterday is he ruled that these lower court judges, as they handle immigration cases, have a very narrow scope as far as the Supreme Court is concerned. Judges, he wrote, may have views on which policy approach is better or fairer, but judges are not appointed to make those policy calls. He adds, we merely ensure that the executive branch acts within the confines of the Constitution. So you've seen this a few times now where the Supreme Court has said these lower court judges are getting out of line here and letting their personal views get in the way of how they interpret the Constitution. Now, these lower court judges say, no. This is how we interpret the Constitution. It's you guys up at the Supreme Court that are interpreting this incorrectly and giving the executive far too much power. Nonetheless, the court effectively opened the door here for these raids to continue and for race and the language people speak, particularly in many of these cases Spanish, to be a factor in detaining someone, but not the sole factor. So they can't just go around saying that person looks Latino, let's detain them. What Kavanaugh said yesterday is that that can be one element taken together with other elements that can lead to reasonable suspicion of illegal presence here in the U.S. So, he was laying out yesterday, if it's somebody who speaks Spanish and appears to potentially be foreign born and works at a construction site, then those are several factors there that potentially make it okay here for a detention and for an ID check to happen. But that was a decision that was severely criticized by the dissenting liberal judges yesterday, as well as a number of outside groups. They say this opens the door to widespread racial profiling. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the first Latina justice on the Supreme Court, in a very fiery dissent yesterday, writes, we should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. Rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost, I dissent, she wrote. The ACLU has come out against this. A number of groups have come out against this, saying they're very concerned about this decision. Now, again, the larger issue is still working its way through the court system. But for now, this does give a green light to the Trump administration and immigration enforcement to use race, appearance, language as a factor in detaining people. And it's led some folks across the country to say, if your employees are foreign born and they're here legally, that they should ensure they're bringing their IDs, their passports, whatever they have with them, wherever they go, given what the Supreme Court ordered yesterday.
And Moshe, this all speaks to the larger debate about illegal immigration. Kavanaugh writing, I appreciate that many, not all, but many illegal immigrants come to the U.S. to escape poverty and the lack of freedom and opportunities in their home countries. But the fact remains that under the laws passed by Congress and the president, they are acting illegally by remaining in the United States, at least unless Congress and the president choose some other legislative approach to legalize some or all of those individuals now illegally present in the country. So, Moshe, that is part of the problem, is that the last time Congress passed comprehensive immigration reform was the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. That's about 30 years ago. And that focused on enforcement, not really broad legalization. And since then, there have been many attempts at reform, all of which have failed.
Yeah, Bush in particular, George W. Bush, who was president from 2001 to 2009, really made an attempt at comprehensive immigration reform. But that's as he saw the Republican Party take an increasingly hardline stance. So by the time he was pushing things, he had a bigger issue now with Democrats, but with his own Republican side. And, we have seen how things have proceeded over the course of the past decade. Obama talked about it a bit, but then he was going to have even more trouble with the Republican side because he was a Democrat. And then, of course, that gave rise to Trump, who came in with a very hardline immigration approach in 2016, 2017. So no sign anytime soon of any large-scale immigration reform. And that's the big issue that's brought up repeatedly is what do you do for people who may have been brought here as kids or came here as adults, but are hardworking, want to be contributing members to American society, already pay taxes. Actually, we've talked about this before, millions of undocumented migrants who actually pay into the tax system. And so what do you do about them? How do you give them a pathway to citizenship, in particular in industries that are heavily dependent on undocumented labor, like construction, like hospitality, like restaurants and other businesses like that? So in the meantime, though, it does not appear there is any plan around that. There has been talk within the Trump administration about a sort of touchback policy, which is if you're here illegally, go back home and then show us that you went back home voluntarily, and then we will consider you to potentially come back. So touch back in your home country and come back again. But there's been no real rollout around that, no details around that. That's really just been speculated and leaked out. So we'll wait to hear details there, Jill, but a notable ruling from the Supreme Court yesterday, and we will watch what unfolds in Chicago here in the coming days.
Okay, now to a murder in Charlotte that has entered the national conversation about crime. A deadly stabbing on Charlotte's light rail last month has ignited concerns about public safety and also gaps in the mental health system. Surveillance video shows 23-year-old Irina Zarutska being stabbed to death without provocation on August 22nd by DeCarlos Brown. She was riding a Charlotte light rail train. Brown pulls out a pocket knife and stabs her in the neck. Again, there wasn't even any prior interaction between the two of them. He then drops the knife, calmly walks off the train. Police would then arrest him on the platform. He now faces first-degree murder charges. The victim, Zarutska, she fled Ukraine back in 2022 with her mom, sister, and brother. She was trying to escape Russia's war. She worked in Charlotte at a local restaurant. She attended community college and was trying to become a veterinary assistant. And this case has now become a flashpoint in Charlotte and also around the country, sparking debate about crime on the city's transit system, mental health oversight, and how to prevent future tragedies.
Jill, while the crime itself happened a couple of weeks ago, this story really took off on news outlets and on social media over the weekend after that footage, that horrific footage, was released at the end of last week. Now, Brown himself has been charged with first-degree murder. His attorney has filed a motion for a mental competency evaluation. He has 14 prior arrests, including having served prison time for robbery and burglary. There's also some weapons violations in there. In January, he was arrested for misusing 911. Local North Carolina media is reporting that he was known by authorities to have schizophrenia. His mother told CNN that he had struggled with his mental health and had been homeless for a while. Now, as far as security is concerned, just watching that unfold, Jill, the car was nearly half full, but there was no security in that car. Apparently, they were riding one car over when the stabbing occurred. He boarded without a ticket. He sits behind her. He stabs her. He then just drops the knife, walks off like nothing happened. And then, of course, is eventually arrested. But with all the media, with all the conservative influencers talking about the story over the weekend, it was no surprise that on Monday, President Trump chimed in.
Yeah, Trump said about the case, quote, when you have horrible killings, you have to take horrible actions. He wrote, quote, the blood of this innocent woman can literally be seen dripping from the killer's knife. And now her blood is on the hands of the Democrats who refuse to put bad people in jail. And he also went after national media for a lack of coverage, Moshe, there wasn't really a lot of national coverage, and we did hear from a number of people who reached out to us on Instagram over the weekend for more information.
Yeah, a number of North Carolina residents, folks specifically from Charlotte, who said, hey, I'm looking for more on this, and I'm not seeing much coverage when I Google around. There was coverage on sort of the local NBC station, local ABC station, some of the local news outlets in Charlotte, but otherwise almost no national coverage over the weekend as that video was released. As was pointed out by a number of conservative influencers online, the claim was that you guys in the national media, when it's a crime where a minority is killed, especially by somebody who might be white, there's massive coverage of it, especially also incidents of law enforcement killing people, but nothing here. So an accusation of reverse racism, so to speak. And you did see, Jill, finally late Sunday night into early Monday morning, some of the national outlets clearly were responsive to that. And I saw the first story on CNN.com by late morning on Monday and various other outlets as well. Now, of course, with the president addressing this and speaking to this, especially in the incendiary terms that he has, that her blood is on the hands of Democrats who refuse to put people in jail, you can see this story really taking off here. One of the cases they contrasted with this case, of course, is the Daniel Penny case. That is a white man who put a black homeless man in a fatal chokehold on the New York City subway system just a couple of years ago. That got a massive amount of coverage. And so, again, the accusation from the right was that the media wasn't covering the reverse here. Nonetheless, we are hearing from people across the country, including people, again, in Charlotte who are concerned about crime in Charlotte, even though statistically speaking, and this is the story that we've told time and time again in the last couple of months, statistics show that crime in Charlotte is down this year. We looked at the numbers for the first half of 2025, down significantly from 2024, especially when it comes to violent crime, but people aren't feeling it. It's the same story we hear in DC. It's the same story we hear in New York. It's the same story we hear in Chicago. And part of that is playing into the federal storyline here, into the national storyline here, and President Trump's push to bring in National Guard to go after local officials. And we do hear from people who say, I voted for Kamala Harris. I'm not a fan of President Trump, but I don't feel safe. So maybe we should let him send the National Guard in here. Now, of course, the counter to that is what's the long-term solution? And they're not really trained in law enforcement. But I think what you're hearing from people is this sense of desperation and this sense of feeling like crime isn't actually going down, even if the statistics show that it is down.
Right. As we've talked about a lot on this podcast, the numbers really don't tell the full story. And as we have heard from many people in the Mo News community, it doesn't really matter what the statistics say. If you are seeing more crime in your neighborhood or you don't feel safe parking your car on the street because you think that it's going to get broken into, it doesn't really matter what the numbers say. Time for the speed read from ABC News. Jury selection in the case of the man accused of trying to kill Donald Trump on his golf course in Florida last year got off to a rocky start Monday morning. 59-year-old Ryan Routh is representing himself. Despite not being a lawyer and having pretty limited legal experience, he was barred by U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon from asking most of his proposed jury questions because they were, quote, politically charged and irrelevant. According to Cannon, Routh proposed asking jurors about Trump's proposed acquisition of Greenland and their stance on Palestine. Routh also wanted to ask jurors what they would do if they were driving and saw a turtle in the middle of the road. He suggested that that could speak to their character and mindset. Judge Cannon said that those questions were really off base and have no relevance to the jury selection process. By the way, if that name, Aileen Cannon, Judge Cannon, sounds familiar, it's because she is that Trump appointee. She oversaw and dismissed one of the president's criminal cases. She has also been randomly assigned this case. Routh, a 59-year-old construction worker from North Carolina and Hawaii, he has pleaded not guilty to 5 criminal charges that risk sending him to prison for life, including attempting to kill a presidential candidate and possession of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence.
So these are always interesting and chaotic trials to watch, Jill, when the defendant chooses to defend themselves. Partially, that often happens when public defenders are like, I can't deal with this guy. Or this defendant just decides, yeah, well, I can do a better job myself. I've seen enough law and order in my life. Again, he has no legal background. The judge here is allowing him to continue to defend himself, but has imposed very strict rules to prevent the trial from spiraling into what she called calculated chaos. Since taking over his own defense, Routh, according to filings here, has requested a, quote, beatdown session with Trump, asked to compete for his life in a round of golf with the president, and has proposed being part of a prisoner swap instead of going to trial. All of those things have been rejected, I'm told, so far. Background here, Routh actually set his plan in motion, according to prosecutors, to try to kill the president after that unsuccessful attempt last July, that assassination attempt in Pennsylvania that, buzzed the president's ear. Then Routh decided to acquire a military-grade rifle, burner phones. He started to research Trump's movements and campaign events, and that's when he would attempt to kill him on the golf course, and they were able to find him ahead of him even being able to see Trump on that day. There's a lot of evidence here, Jill. Apparently he was coordinating with someone he believed was a Ukrainian with access to military weapons, and he literally wrote to them, I need equipment so that Trump cannot get elected. So there's a lot of evidence here that the prosecutors are pretty confident will put this guy away, regardless of what he thinks his ability is to defend himself in court, Jill. But this is certainly a trial we will watch, and Judge Eileen Cannon has her hands full with this guy, given what he's already been asking for.
Now to one of the most talked about congressional seats ahead of next year's midterm elections, the New York 12th District, representing most of Manhattan. From USA Today, there is a lot of talk about who is in and who is out in terms of trying to fill Jerry Nadler's New York congressional seat. The longtime congressman announced recently that he would not be running for re-election, citing the need for generational change. And a couple of famous political last names are in the mix. Chelsea Clinton's team denying reports that she plans to enter the race. There had been speculation about the presidential daughter running. At the same time, Kennedy heir Jack Schlossberg is considering a run. He is the grandson of President John F. Kennedy. Schlossberg said in a post on X, "Hey guys, have formed an exploratory committee." More on him in a bit. As for Clinton, she has previously passed on chances to follow in her parents' footsteps. Clinton was once an NBC correspondent, similar to fellow former first kid Jenna Bush Hager, and she has instead focused on global health advocacy and writing books with and without her mom. Schlossberg, meanwhile, is the only grandson of former President John F. Kennedy, and he is considering a run. So Moshe, what do we know about him?
So Schlossberg, you might have seen some of his videos on social media. He tends to post a lot. He is the son of Caroline Kennedy. Interestingly, Jill, I just realized this, is the 12th Congressional District. You got Upper East Side, you got Upper West Side, you got Midtown, everything north of 14th Street in Manhattan. And you also got Central Park. So this is his grandmother, Jackie Kennedy's, the old area she lived in, including the Jackie Kennedy Reservoir in Central Park. He would represent that if somehow he was able to be elected here. He has been pretty outspoken on social media, as I mentioned. I ran into him over at the Democratic National Convention last summer in Chicago. He would be the first Kennedy family member to run for Congress for a while now, since Joe Kennedy III, one of his, I think that would be a cousin of his or a second cousin, left his U.S. House seat in Massachusetts just a few years ago. Jack Schlossberg is a 32-year-old graduate of both Yale and Harvard. He is prolific on X. Oftentimes, Jill, we could call it trolling, what he's doing on social media these days. Sometimes pretty obscene posts, sometimes pretty extreme posts. He is very critical of Trump. He's also very critical of his cousin, Bobby Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary. So there's a lot of Kennedy family politics that often gets posted there. So he's looking at a run here. As you mentioned, Chelsea Clinton is out. Another notable name, Lena Khan. She's the ex-Federal Trade Commissioner, a past appointee of Joe Biden. She's been talked about potentially running for this seat. And again, a very prominent seat given what part of New York City you represent. Nadler has been representing the district since the early 90s. He's one of the most senior members of Congress, now in his late 70s, has some health issues, and so he decided to get out. But we're going to watch, among the many seats we're watching next year, this is going to be one of them.
From the Mo News Instagram, following up on the proposal by Florida's top leaders to end all vaccine mandates in the state, including for kids. Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo admitting on Sunday that his team did not study the impact that eliminating vaccine mandates would have on the spread of diseases before announcing that policy change last week. So as we reported, this is for all vaccines, everything from polio and measles to chickenpox. The Surgeon General saying it wasn't necessary to make projections about the impact of ending the mandates because he says it's all about freedom. Here's a bit of his exchange with CNN's Jake Tapper.
Did your department do any data analysis? Did you do any data projection of how many new cases of these diseases there will be in Florida once you remove vaccine mandates?
Absolutely. So absolutely not, because it's not you mentioned whooping cough there. So there's this conflation of the science and sort of what is the right and wrong thing to do. So scientifically, you mentioned whooping cough. So that's an example. This is part of the issue with informed consent. That's an example of a vaccine that is ineffective. The data show that it's ineffective at preventing transmission. So sort of mandates with that really don't have anything to do with the notion of transmission. And then in terms of, like analysis, well, ultimately, this is an issue very clearly of parents' rights. So do I need to analyze whether it's appropriate for parents to be able to decide what goes into their children's bodies? I don't need to do an analysis on that.
So, Jill, he did a few interviews beyond that CNN interview, and he said, in essence, this is not about science. This is just about freedom and giving parents freedom here, though obviously that message was concerning to a number of Florida residents who are like, but I do care about the science of this. I don't want my kids to pick up certain illnesses that have been gone for a very long time. I haven't had to think about polio since my grandparents' generation. And so this whole plan here by Governor DeSantis and the Surgeon General, who you just heard, is pretty controversial, including among some senior Republicans in the state. Senator Scott from Florida, he's not bought into this. You also have Byron Donalds. He's a Republican, very prominent Trump supporter. He's not fully bought in here on this plan. You also have the state Senate president in Florida, along with the state speaker of the House, both Republicans. They're going to need to be on board with this. They're both not putting out statements, at least last time I looked on Monday. So it appears here they have a lot of convincing to do. And I'm not sure that the argument that we don't have to worry about the science or do any projections on who could be hurt by this is going to pay off. Interestingly, Jill, on Friday, we mentioned this on yesterday's pod, Trump poured cold water on the Florida plan, saying vaccines, quote, pure and simple work. And you need to be very careful when you say that some people don't have to be vaccinated. I think those vaccines should be used, the good ones. Otherwise, some people are going to catch it. They're going to endanger other people. So the president not on board with the Florida plan here either.
From Deadline, Howard Stern pranking fans and the media Monday by faking his departure from SiriusXM after months of rumors that he might not renew his contract with the network. Andy Cohen briefly took over his time slot Monday morning, announcing the new Andy 100 channel, which prompted outlets like CNBC and the AP to report that Stern was leaving. 10 minutes later, Stern was back, confirming that the Howard Stern show isn't going anywhere. So take a listen first to Andy Cohen and then to Howard Stern.
If you are listening, Howard, I do love you, and I hope that after you do whatever healing needs to happen, you will come back stronger than ever. I just want all of Howard's fans to know you will have a home on Andy 100.
Everything you've been reading in the paper about me or about Robin is completely false. What pisses me off is now I can't leave. I've been thinking about retiring. Now I can't, because then they'll say I got pushed out. So I'll be back.
Right. Moshe Stern went on to say that these rumors were everywhere and that he was actually approached by other media companies saying, wait, if you're not signing with Sirius, come over to us.
Yeah, there's a big question for SiriusXM, which has been paying Stern about $100 million a year for several contracts now, whether he's still worth it. So we have seen a lot of leaks back and forth, presumably from his side and from the other side throughout the summer. So there has been a lot of chatter about this. Does it make sense for SiriusXM, as they've picked up people like Alex Cooper and others, to continue to be paying Stern this amount of money? He does not get the audiences that he used to when they first brought him aboard nearly 20 years ago. So it appears for now that there's going to be some sort of deal here. Stern has a very large staff, still has a pretty significant following. Again, his last contract was a $500 million 5-year deal, $100 million a year. That is elapsed. Will he get that again? Unclear, but at least I guess negotiations are going well enough for him to be back on air. A reminder, Stern is 71 years old. And Jill, it was interesting listening to Stern recently, because I remember growing up with Howard Stern in the 90s, early 2000s, when he was the shock jock of shock jocks and had, a lot of very risque, extreme content, nude women running around his studio, a whole variety of things. It is very much a softer, woker Howard Stern these days. He's also gotten pretty liberal, very critical of Donald Trump as well. So definitely a very different show than existed a couple decades ago. But I will say that if you're looking for a compelling, interesting interview with a major celebrity or prominent person, Stern does have this way, Jill, of getting people to open up and tell him things that you typically never hear in any other interview. And so we used to make a point of downloading Stern interviews in recent years. Alex and I, before we went on a road trip, and some incredible interviews in recent years with like Paul McCartney and George Clooney and De Niro and a variety of actors and musicians, where Stern just, again, gets them to say things. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe they just said this.
I completely agree with you. He's probably one of the best interviewers in media right now. And his show has evolved. At 71 years old, can he really be the shock jock anymore? I don't know.
Jill, I will say yesterday, he at least brought the shock back into that title, at least for a few minutes there.
Gotcha. Yes.
Gotcha. I woke up yesterday morning, I saw the first alert from AP. I'm like, oh my God, it's real. Howard's gone. And then as I was like, messaging it to you guys, like I then get the next alert, which is like, we got pranked. AP, like Howard Stern staying in his job. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin in 1776 on this day. The Second Continental Congress formally adopted the name United States of America, replacing the previous title, United Colonies of America. Speaking of states, on this day in 1850, California was officially admitted as the 31st state. So a happy 175th birthday to California. A different type of state, Jill, on this day in 1948, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea, a.k.a. North Korea. See, they call it People's Democratic, even though it's really bad for the people, nor democratic. But North Korea was declared on this day, founded by Kim Il-sung. He was the first dictator. His son then took over, and then his grandson, that is the current leader, Kim Jong-un, took over after him. We end here with a bit of pop culture history. On this day in 1956, Elvis Presley appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. 60 million people tuned in, or about 83% of Americans' viewing audience at that time. So 83% of people with a television tuned in for Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show. But a lot of people complained, Jill, to the FCC, sending letters in saying, we didn't like his vulgar, hip-shaking gyrations. The parents said, we can't have our kids watch this stuff. This Elvis Presley is way too risque. And ultimately, in a future appearance, Jill, they would refuse to show Elvis below the waist on future television appearances after that Ed Sullivan appearance.
What would they think of music now?
Right. Did anyone see was it Sabrina Carpenter who had that, performance, that very Britney-esque performance on the VMAs on Sunday night?
That's the least of it, Moshe.
That would Elvis would even be shocked. If Elvis came back, though some people still believe he's still alive, Jill, he would be shocked by that performance. And finally, turning 30 years old today, one of my favorite songs from the 90s, Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio, reached #1 on the Billboard charts today, September 9th, 1995. I should emphasize it's Gangsta's Paradise, not Gangster's Paradise. There's an infamous Jeopardy clip where the answer, or the answer, what is Gangsta's Paradise, was rejected when the contestant said Gangster's Paradise, not Gangsta's Paradise.
Really?
Yeah, they're a stickler for accuracy there on Jeopardy.
All right, I guess gangster is a different word.
Enunciate, everyone. Enunciate, because it matters, and sometimes a lot of money is on the line on Jeopardy.
So we want to thank you for listening to the very well enunciated Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. Those reviews matter.
Those reviews matter. We appreciate you. Check out the Mo News Direct feed, our new web app. Allows you to get all the coverage, but off of Instagram. Join Premium, mo.news/premium. Check it out. There's a 1-month free trial. Again, mo.news/premium. Thank you in advance for joining.
Thank you. Listen to Mo News.